For 10 years of marriage, the empire Caleb built became a tribute to Olivia's first love. Caleb was sent to a psychiatric facility and turned into Julian's guinea pig for drug trials. While fed Julian candy, Caleb was being force-fed medication, though they didn't know the voice recorder under his pillow was on, and the medicine had long since been swapped for saline. For 10 years of marriage to Olivia, Caleb had always believed they would be happy forever. He had stayed by her side, supporting her from her family's downfall to the pinnacle of power and wealth. Countless nights, she would lean her head against his neck and sigh, "Caleb, it's a good thing I have you. Thank you for always being there for me." Over the years, they had always treated each other with respect, and they even had a sweet, sensible daughter. That was until Caleb got into a car accident. Olivia, claiming he was unwell, arranged for him to recuperate at home, forbidding him from going back to the office. "It's too weak now, and the office affairs are complicated and overwhelming. Why don't you just stay home and keep Julian company? He missed his best window for treatment after that car accident. Trying to save you, that's why he's been suffering from these persistent headaches." She looked at Caleb, her face filled with an air of absolute certainty, just as now, she was asking him to be a test subject for medication to cure his cousin. "Caleb, this is what you owe him. You don't want to see Julian restless and plagued by nightmares every day, do you?" Julian, Caleb's cousin and his wife's first love, whatever wanted, Olivia would offer it to him without hesitation. When suffered from worsening depression and chronic headaches, Olivia didn't hesitate to use Caleb for the drug trials. Being a test subject is easier said than done. A test subject must endure not only physical pain but also the constant, pervasive fear of the unknown. Those drugs could only be formally used on patients after undergoing clinical trials, and was that clinical trial subject, the white rat used to test errors for others. Because he was Julian's cousin, this blood connection meant that the drugs tested on him could have the maximum effect on Julian, even if they were only distantly related cousins. Be a test subject. Fine. Caleb swallowed the metallic taste in his throat and offered a slight smile. To better fulfill his role as a lab rat, Olivia simply confined him to a psychiatric facility. Before leaving, he saw for the first time the person who had decisively abandoned Olivia and left the country 10 years ago. He was wearing a blue shirt, his skin fair and rosy, showing no signs of the emaciation or despair expected of a depression patient. "Dear cousin, I heard you're sick and being sent to a treatment facility." Before could respond, Julian covered his mouth and chuckled, "If you leave, who will take care of Olivia?" Olivia was Caleb's only concern. You must treat her well," Caleb stammered, his plea humble. Julian chuckled, patting Caleb's cheek, "To thank my dear cousin for being my test subject, of course I'll treat her well. The way you were raised, as your wife, she deserves the same, right? I certainly won't play favorites." Caleb felt as if he had fallen into an ice abyss. This was his cousin, the cousin who had delighted in tormenting him since childhood. During an accident in their childhood, Julian had lost his biological parents. Richard and Eleanor took him in, and he became Caleb's cousin. Caleb had merely thrown a small tantrum when Julian arrived, and Richard and Eleanor had immediately labeled him narrow-minded. Richard doted on Julian, letting him tear up Caleb's homework and snatch his toy cars. Eleanor pitied him when Vance's family went bankrupt overnight. Julian was the one who was supposed to marry Olivia. In the end, it was Caleb who wore the suit and attended the ceremony. Julian had been unwilling to marry the impoverished Olivia back then, so he had coolly left the country. Meanwhile, Caleb endured Olivia's disdain, being misunderstood as the terrible person who stole her cousin's bride. Julian knew Caleb loved her to the point of madness. A psychiatric facility was truly a terrifying place. Caleb had his blood drawn 3 times in just 1 week. His head felt heavy, and he was dragged into the restroom, where the stench was omnipresent. He struggled to look up. Several women with disheveled hair, dressed in blue and white hospital gowns, surrounded him in the corner. The objects in their hands sent shivers down his spine. Broken toothbrushes, their snapped edges glinting sharply, burning cigarette butts, the smell of charred flesh seeming to waft through the air, stout sticks, each blow dull and painful, leaving behind black and blue marks. In a daze, Caleb seemed to return to the dark, endless days of the past. The family went bankrupt, and Olivia, as the sole heir, was suddenly burdened with massive debts. Her elderly parents, unable to bear the blow, suffered sudden strokes and passed away. Even their funeral was hastily arranged by Caleb, using what little wedding savings he had left. Richard and Eleanor refused to acknowledge Olivia as their daughter-in-law, and they threw Caleb out along with her. Without money, they could only live in a cheap rental apartment. The dirty, chaotic neighborhood had no security whatsoever. Debt collectors, who seemed to get information from nowhere, harassed them daily. Caleb would often be inexplicably beaten on his way home late at night. Reporting it to the police was useless. There were no surveillance cameras, so no one was caught. If he told Olivia, she would only ask with annoyance, "You're a grown man, can't you fight back? Shouldn't you reflect on yourself? Why do you always come back so late?" At home, she acted like a queen, spending her days cooped up, mourning the Vance family's past. She didn't know that Caleb worked 3 jobs simultaneously to support their home. He had once been wrongly accused of plagiarism, which led to constant setbacks. His carefully completed paintings were sold off for a pittance. He could only earn money by painting notice boards and murals in various neighborhoods. Occasionally, he would run into his old art school classmates, who would only mock him. Well, isn't it the cheat? You even dared to plagiarize your own cousin's artwork. How do you still have the nerve to paint?" Caleb's grip on his brush tightened, almost digging into his flesh. But he remained silent. He swallowed his anger, like broken teeth mixed with blood. He couldn't argue, because the evidence was conclusive. He couldn't clear his name, because his wife, Richard and Eleanor, all stood by his cousin, even if they knew the truth. They simply destroyed the evidence and offered perfunctory comfort. "Caleb, Julian just made a mistake for a moment. The drafts have already been submitted, and there's nothing he can do now. Julian is only 18 and has no parents. You can't let him bear the name of a plagiarist and be looked down upon forever, can you?" Caleb saw Julian again. 3 months later, Julian seemed quite pleased looking at Caleb's hollow eyes, whispering something to the doctor beside him. When his gaze fell on the pristine white uniform, Caleb's body trembled involuntarily. Beneath his hospital gown, his body was covered in scars. The crudely carved wound on his chest had already scabbed over. The ugly scar couldn't hide the word trash. Caleb's eyes widened in terror, but frowned. "Caleb, what kind of look is that?" Caleb curled into a ball as if startled, trembling like a leaf. "Don't hit me, please. Don't hit me. Don't hit me, Olivia. I am in so much pain." Olivia stepped forward and grabbed the doctor's arm. "What exactly did you do to him?" The person merely adjusted their glasses, the lenses reflecting the harsh white light, sending a chill down Caleb's spine. "Ms. Olivia, please calm down." The doctor smoothed his wrinkled collar. "Mr. Caleb is a bit antisocial. We have already punished the patients who engaged in fighting." He bit down hard on the words "the patients," and Olivia's expression gradually softened. "Caleb is still as withdrawn as you were when you were a child." She didn't have the slightest suspicion, because had been bullied since childhood and never fit into any class. But before his cousin arrived, he had been a very likable child. "Caleb, come and sign this. Once recovers, we can start over." She carefully held out a pad with bright red ink. The black characters on white paper declared, between the lines, that Caleb was willingly acting as a test subject. No coercion, no threats, only volition. Caleb forced the moisture from his eyes back. "Start over." He looked at the face that once filled him with joy and signed his name. On the day the drug trials officially began, his room became lively. Richard and Eleanor, Olivia, and Julian all came. 8 pairs of eyes stared intently at him. "Caleb, what are you waiting for?" "Julian is waiting for this medicine to save his life." A sharp pain shot through his wrist, and Caleb winced. Richard, however, thought he was expressing dissatisfaction. "Caleb, don't mess around. The doctor said your cousin's headaches are already very serious. He can't wait." So that was it. No wonder Olivia was so anxious. Before he even developed depression, Caleb was forced into the bathroom by the nurses. His body was submerged in cold water, and thick blood streamed from his wrist. It dripped into the bathtub, staining the water crimson. The flashing light stung his eyes, and blood loss made his body grow cold, the circulation slowing. When he was roughly pulled out and his wrist bandaged, he was told the wound was too deep, and he might never be able to hold a paintbrush again. Originally, Olivia didn't believe it. She didn't believe he would be so resolute as to cut his wrist, but now she had no choice but to believe. Because he loved painting so much, he must truly not want to live. A flicker of wild joy crossed her eyes, and the day of the drug trial was thus moved forward. "Caleb," Olivia called him, her eyes filled with a stern warning. His lips tasted of blood, and Caleb picked up the cup, drinking it all in one gulp. Richard immediately clapped his hands in approval. "Olivia, Julian will rely on you from now on." Eleanor took Julian's hand and comforted him. "Don't blame yourself too much. Your cousin is doing this voluntarily. Julian wore a look of reluctance, but his eyes were fixed on Caleb, with a familiar glint of provocation. Richard, Eleanor, don't worry about me. Caleb is the one who needs comfort right now. Olivia sighed. Julian is still as kind as ever. He looked worried. Caleb, you should go rest quickly. Let the doctor take a good look at you. With that, he twisted the lucky red string on his wrist. The blessed knot looked somewhat worn, a stark contrast to his pristine appearance. He certainly should be examined by a doctor to see if this medicine has any side effects, Olivia said. Having Caleb taken away, as she turned, Julian whispered in Caleb's ear, silly cousin, do you really think Olivia cares about that pathetic thing you begged for on a grueling pilgrimage, where people prayed for blessings? Trees reached high to the heavens. 3 years after they were married, Olivia encountered an accident abroad. She was stabbed multiple times and fell into a coma. After being transferred back to the country for over half a month of treatment, she remained unconscious. Caleb cried daily, handling everything personally, not daring to entrust it to anyone else. At that time, he heard there was a temple on a mountain outside the city, accessible only to those with a sincere heart. He took a grueling pilgrimage, knocking his forehead on the ground until it bled, 3,000 steps, each one a tearful plea, until he finally knocked on the temple's gate. By the time he returned with a blessed charm, Olivia had already awakened. Caleb had believed his sincerity had touched heaven and earth, finally saving her. Afterward, her attitude towards him softened daily, and he thought their good days were finally coming. His body ached terribly, the pain was bone deep, and Caleb trembled all over. His teeth chattered. He desperately swallowed the cries of pain in his throat. They would beat him if he cried out. The more miserably he screamed, the more excited they would become. His indifferent Richard, his resentful Eleanor. Scenes from his mind flashed by in rapid succession. Why are you back so dirty again? Are you hanging out with those unsavory people again? His cousin, Julian, with a smile that concealed a dagger. Richard, Eleanor, don't wrong Caleb. I heard Caleb say those people are his friends. If you talk about Caleb's friends like that, he'll be unhappy. In his bleak childhood, Olivia was his only glimmer of sweetness, but as early as Julian's departure abroad, that bit of sweetness had turned sour. It had been bitter in his heart, bitter for 10 years. When he was dragged to the psychiatric facility, the old butler sneered, so what if you helped Ms. Olivia save the family? Ms. Olivia has always loved Julian, and only Julian. Everything you worked so hard to build will become a ladder for someone else to climb. With tearing pain throughout his body, Caleb seemed to hear a whisper before the car exploded. The patient is hemorrhaging badly. The blood bank is critical. What a sin. Who did he offend? Someone tampered with the car. Caleb's pupils contracted. He had only lent the car to Julian. Julian, it was Julian. The image of the young man in a white t-shirt flashed in his mind, tears moistening his eyelashes, seemingly rushing toward him with a face full of concern, but the words he spoke were so malicious. Tell me, will your Olivia believe your side of the story, or will she believe my deliberate instigation? No, it couldn't be. Olivia wouldn't do this to him. His life shouldn't be like this. She would buy him the mango cake he had dreamed of as a child for his birthday. She would carefully select paints for him and bring them to his hand. She was the CEO of a publicly traded company, surrounded by families eager to curry favor. Yet, he had never seen her give another man a second glance. But that blessed charm truly appeared on Julian's wrist. Caleb felt as if a sharp blade had pierced his chest, his face pale with pain. Was it all fake? He suddenly opened his eyes and crawled out of bed. Olivia. Olivia, where are you? I am in so much pain. His response was a cold sedative injection. What exactly did he do? Being a test subject is bad enough, but his own wife doesn't even come to see him. She's only concerned with his cousin. Caleb could no longer endure it, and blood spurted from his mouth. Something within him collapsed with a crash. The things that had caused him unbearable heartache fractured into pieces. As the sedative took effect, they shattered into countless tiny fragments. He felt as if he had forgotten something. What had he forgotten? He didn't know. When he opened his eyes again, he was still in the psychiatric facility. The last medication hadn't worked well, and he still had self-harming tendencies, but said, even if that medicine works, I wouldn't use it on Julian. He's afraid of pain. The next time he was tested, Richard and Eleanor didn't come. Julian still wore a white t-shirt, looking cheerful, sunny, and harmless. Caleb, I am so sorry. The trial is so painful, and you're the one bearing all the suffering. As the drug took effect, Caleb broke out in a cold sweat. Olivia seemed to soften, wanting to help him sit down, but then she heard a gasp from behind her. Olivia. My head hurts so much. I think I saw the car explode again. Julian. Olivia turned, immediately taking his arm and supporting him. Watch him. Don't let him go crazy. With that, their departing figures were resolute. Strange. He should have felt sad, seeing her abandon him. But now, his heart felt not a single ripple. He obediently described his post-medication reactions. But after being untied, he noticed the doctor's notebook. It was blank. It was supposed to be a drug trial, yet they weren't even recording the patient's clinical reactions. Was this really just a simple drug trial? If not, what had he taken the first 2 times? Perhaps after being beaten so many times, Caleb knew exactly which parts of the human body hurt the most when struck, yet showed no external injury. He took advantage of a moment when the doctor, who had helped him slit his wrist, was alone, dragging her to an empty corner. Shh, don't make a sound, or I'll kill you. The doctor's face turned pale with fear, and she begged for mercy repeatedly. Mr. Caleb, it wasn't us, it really wasn't us. We didn't want to. The sharp object in Caleb's hand dug slightly into her flesh, and he coldly pressed his questions. She quickly confessed everything. The drug trial was merely a disguised method of tormenting him. This treatment facility was a massive stage. The so-called doctors were nothing but frauds without even medical licenses. The actors performed on schedule, and the only one they needed to perform for was Caleb himself. He had to escape. Olivia didn't come for the next few drug trials. Caleb quietly overheard the nurses' chatter and pieced together the truth. The so-called unfinished medications he had swallowed were actually just some neurological agents. They caused no physical harm, only some mental stimulation. Did his dear cousin, suffering from schizophrenia himself, just not want to see others well? He was still as malicious as ever. Caleb needed to lure Olivia here. This treatment facility was like a fortress. Only with her arrival could he have a chance to escape. Cool. If she doesn't come, I won't take the medicine. Caleb stood by the window, his legs dangling in the air, even swinging them leisurely. The actors dared not approach, and had to call Ms. Olivia. Soon, an angry female voice came from outside the door. Caleb, what are you causing trouble for again? After a period of not seeing her, Caleb found himself feeling unfamiliar with her face. He rarely saw her this enraged. Perhaps it was because he used to be so compliant with her. He listened to everything she said. Now, he was on the verge of success, but he had given up halfway. That must have really infuriated her. Caleb, the doctor said Julian only has 5 months left. If the medicine isn't successful soon, every day we delay is another day of risk. Can you bear to watch him die for you? Olivia lowered her stance, coaxing him gently, but was unyielding. What do you mean die for me? He's not even my brother. Why should I care about him? His indifferent attitude completely enraged her. Caleb, I never realized your heart was so vicious. If hadn't saved you, how would he have hit his head and gotten this old injury? And now you're treating him like this. Did I beg him to come save me? What if he deliberately planned the car accident? Caleb retorted. Olivia choked, her lips moving. But she didn't know what to say. Her face darkened. Caleb, Lily is still with me. Even a tiger doesn't eat its cubs. Olivia was actually using their child to threaten him for a man. Caleb felt a dizzy spell, his body swaying as he stumbled towards the window. At the crucial moment, Olivia rushed towards him, and so, they both fell onto the hard floor. Caleb calmly calculated in his mind. He had lost his suicide leverage, and his child was still in her hands. He was outnumbered. He couldn't play hardball. He obediently drank the medication. His clothes were drenched in cold sweat, but he felt no pain. He heard Olivia's voice tighten. Caleb, how could you throw up blood? Thanks to that mouthful of blood, Caleb finally escaped the treatment facility that had held him for 4 months. Returning to that villa, his heart was surprisingly calm. Sir, your room is over there, is that so? Caleb's eyes went straight to the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. He clearly remembered that he should be living there. Perhaps he had forgotten too many things recently. Maybe he was having a mental breakdown. Caleb, you're finally out of the hospital. A man gracefully descended from the 2nd floor, his face showing just the right amount of surprise. Through the wide-open bedroom door, Caleb vaguely saw it, the framed picture above the bed. It had his face on it. It was his and Olivia's wedding photo. But now, sleeping in his bedroom was another man. Caleb averted his gaze, only to find Julian staring intently at him. I heard you threw up blood, and that's why Olivia brought you back. Was the doghouse I meticulously prepared for you not comfortable enough? Why did you come back? It's a shame. I've been living in your and Olivia's room for 5 months now, so I can only inconvenience my dear cousin by having you stay in the guest room. He seemed somewhat disdainful, his eyes holding contempt. Caleb, just watch me closely. Then, his expression changed. He slammed his forehead against the corner of a nearby cabinet, blood streaming down his cheek, staining his sunny, handsome face, the crimson stark against his pale skin. Caleb, what's wrong? Why did you push me? Did I do something wrong? Tell me, cousin, and it'll definitely change. Caleb watched him perform silently, even feeling a dry heave. Damn it, he was disgusted. Change what? Olivia looked anxiously at the wound on Julian's forehead. Caleb, I brought you back out of kindness, not so you could bully Julian recklessly. Julian, feigning injury, was helped to the bedroom by Olivia. Julian, don't be afraid. I've already called the doctor. His cousin intimately rested his head on Olivia's lap, whining dramatically about the pain. Meanwhile, Caleb's arms were twisted behind his back, his cheek pressed against the cold floor. Struggling to look up, he met Julian's sharp, malicious eyes. They held a familiar, victorious sneer. What did it matter if he had escaped the treatment facility? He had merely jumped from one cage into another, having made Julian bleed on his forehead right after returning. Caleb was strictly forbidden from leaving the guest room freely. The drug trials became increasingly frequent, and his memory loss accelerated, until one day, he was invited to dinner in the dining room. Olivia and Julian sat close together, exchanging food, serving each other. They truly were a perfect couple, but Caleb couldn't bear to watch. There was saliva on those chopsticks. They really must have been. He thought they must be truly hungry. Caleb mused, his gaze inadvertently meeting Olivia's. He thought he had looked away fast enough. Perhaps the disgust in his eyes was too obvious and had angered Olivia, her eyes fixed on him. Caleb, look at me. He looked up, the expression in his eyes completely clear. A rare flicker of panic crossed Olivia's face. No, not that kind of look. No, she was crazy, wasn't she? Did she like to see disgust in people's eyes? Caleb was speechless internally, but he obediently let the disgust show in his eyes again. The woman seemed burned by his gaze, rushing forward to grab his wrist. Caleb, look at me again. Caleb suppressed the urge to roll his eyes, looking her up and down again, from her eyebrows, to her nose, to her lips. He examined her much more closely than before, and he realized even more clearly, he had almost forgotten all memories related to her, but she seemed to have completely panicked. Can you let go of me now? Blocking my meal. Caleb pushed her hand away and rotated his wrist. Hiss. It hurt quite a bit. Olivia, what's wrong? Olivia waved her hand, murmuring as if disoriented. Nothing. Nothing. It was unclear if she was responding to Julian or talking to herself. After that, she seemed to lose her mind. She would frequently appear before Caleb's eyes. He found it endlessly annoying. Olivia, since you like Julian, why don't you give me a divorce agreement? We can part ways amicably. She merely forced a smile. Caleb, what nonsense are you talking about? He my husband. She took his wrist and placed it over her heart. I promised you, once Julian's headaches are cured, we'll start over. Caleb seriously suspected she was lying to him, because he had no memory of her words. Caleb, look, this is the bracelet you gave me for our first wedding anniversary. I've kept it perfectly safe. She presented a brand new, unopened bracelet like a treasure. It clearly wasn't a designer brand. Was he really that poor back then? I don't remember. What about these? For 10 years of marriage, you meticulously prepared gifts for me for every anniversary. The 2-year anniversary rings, the 3-year anniversary perfume. Her eyes grew brighter as she spoke. Caleb's mind was a blank. The butler had clearly said their relationship had been terrible, almost to the point of never speaking again. Would he really meticulously prepare anniversary gifts for her? He shook his head. I don't remember. She seemed utterly disoriented, her eyes dimming. What about this? 4 years ago, I had an accident and was in a coma. You went on a grueling pilgrimage, begging for this blessed charm for me, and I've always worn it on my wrist. She seemed anxious. A while ago, Julian said he liked it, and secretly took it from me. Look, I got it back. She nervously revealed her wrist, looking at Caleb carefully. If he liked it, then just give it to him. It's just a blessed charm anyway. Olivia's calm expression fractured into pieces. Caleb, how could you forget everything? Blood trickled from her palm, and Caleb kindly reminded her, but she ignored her bleeding wound and called the doctor in charge of him. Olivia's face was already cold, but now with blood dripping from her hand, her voice was laced with towering rage. Didn't you say he would only experience a bit of stimulation? Why does he not remember anything now? The doctor was terrified and practically tripped over himself. Perhaps the medication was too frequent, damaging the patient's brain nerves. That's why it caused symptoms of amnesia. He said no more, but Olivia's face turned pale, her blood-stained hand trembled slightly. Is there any way to help him regain his memory? Olivia looked at him as if she wanted to kill him, her eyes fixed. Perhaps allowing the patient to come into more contact with familiar things would increase the possibility of regaining memory. Oh, he truly wasn't a real doctor. He even mumbled about treatment plans, and couldn't prescribe medicine. Olivia seemed to have transformed. She followed Caleb day and night. Caleb, look, this is Lily, our child. She began to carefully bring the infant in her arms to him. The baby was so tiny, with chubby, fair cheeks. She was opening her big eyes, looking at him innocently. Caleb merely glanced at her a few times, and then told Olivia to take her away. Olivia's eyes turned red, and her voice choked. Caleb, now you don't even want our child. Will you abandon me mercilessly too? Caleb's left hand, which held the paintbrush, began to move again, his expression calm. What does a child have to do with me? I don't like children. The woman's face instantly turned pale, and she fell silent. This gardenia painting was better than the previous ones. That's right. He had started painting again. Although his right hand couldn't hold a paintbrush anymore, he could learn to use his left. He kept painting gardenias repeatedly, as if possessed. A voice in his heart kept saying that gardenias were very important to him. He was baffled. Caleb, you really have a good strategy, playing hard to get. Julian chuckled coldly. Too bad. Olivia and I are getting married soon. Caleb didn't even spare him a glance, the gardenia under his hand gradually taking shape. Julian seemed somewhat annoyed, then suddenly smiled. Dear cousin, are you truly forgetful or just faking it? I don't believe you can abandon the child you cherish. Lily is dead. His paintbrush paused, and a line went awry. The gardenia looked as if it had been torn apart from the middle. Caleb lowered his eyes and picked up a fresh sheet of paper. Don't you want to know how she died? Julian seemed unable to tell if Caleb was truly indifferent or just pretending, his voice complaining but his eyes full of amusement. It was all because the child cried in the middle of the night. I thought she was hungry, so I made her some formula. I never thought a child would be so delicate, unable to drink even slightly hot water. He sat on the sofa not far from the easel, propping his chin with one hand, looking at Caleb with interest. But now I know, no wonder Olivia hadn't been around him these past few days. She was probably too guilty to sleep well. Even if the child had miraculously survived, growing up in this unhappy family would probably have been painful. Death, perhaps, was another form of liberation. Caleb felt a sense of release. Caleb, are you really going to do this? He nodded, his eyes firm. He wanted to leave, without memories of her. She was now, in his heart, merely a criminal occupying his wife's identity. Are you sure you won't betray me? Caleb calmly looked up. What are you afraid of? Haven't you already found your escape route? Then, take the money, hide abroad, and live lavishly with your mistress. Wouldn't that be better? After reaching an agreement with Julian, Julian used some unknown means. Olivia, who had clung desperately and refused to yield, finally signed the divorce agreement. Caleb, I have nothing left. I've already lost Lily. I can't lose you too. Once's headache is cured. Can we remarry? The woman gripped his hand tightly, pleading humbly. Seeing that she had transferred most of her assets to him, Caleb reluctantly decided to string her along. Actually, he felt some pity for her. Such a massive betrayal, having caused the death of her own daughter, and yet doting on her daughter's killer. TSK. Her life was truly a failure. Caleb turned and went to the police station. According to media reports, a major intentional assault case occurred in our city. Olivia, CEO of Vance, has been exposed for maliciously conducting human experiments, administering banned drugs to victims. Relevant departments have intervened in the investigation. Olivia's whereabouts are currently unknown. Caleb turned off the TV and stretched. Outside the window, the city lights blazed. He was a little hungry. Ordering takeout, he swirled the red wine in his glass. He looked down at the city below. If hadn't given him so much money, with his economic status, he wouldn't be able to live in such a nice villa. Let it be atonement for all the crimes she had committed against him. The doorbell rang, and he opened the door. A rag flew directly at his face. Before completely losing consciousness, he met a pair of familiar dark eyes. Upon waking, he found himself tied up in the bedroom. His hands and feet were bound. The woman beside him, her eyes bloodshot, stared at him without moving. Seeing him awake, a hint of joy appeared on her face. He looked away in disgust, but she gently turned his head back. By the faint moonlight filtering through the window, he saw the fatigue on her face. The face that once overshadowed all flowers was gone. Instead, dark bruises marred the skin beneath her eyes, which were heavily bloodshot. Her hair was matted, looking like it hadn't been washed in days, greasy and emitting a foul odor. Her clothes were equally filthy. It was quite a feat for her. I had been unconscious for so long, yet she hadn't even dared to take a shower. Was she really that afraid I would run? Watching me constantly, never leaving my side. I subtly glanced at the wall clock. It turned out I hadn't been unconscious for very long at all. Caleb, let's leave together. Okay. Let's go abroad together. Find a deserted place. Just the two of us. I deliberately stug her. What about Julian? Why aren't you taking him with us? Her face darkened instantly. Don't mention him. That bastard never had an old illness. He was faking it the whole time. Right after we got our marriage certificate, he conspired with his mistress to murder me and inherit my fortune. Olivia, looking like a demon crawled from hell, began to laugh deliriously. Luckily, I found out in time and stabbed them both to death. I even cut the baby out of that mistress' womb right in front of him. It was that piece of rotten flesh that brought us to this point. She lightly stroked my cheek, the icy touch making me think of a snake. A shiver ran down my spine. She was insane. Caleb, don't look at me with that kind of expression. I am scared. Where was that fear when she was killing people? My gaze kept darting to the wall clock as I struggled to suppress the fear building inside me. She seemed to notice my gaze, and cackled. Caleb, you're not waiting for the police to rescue you, are you? It was as if she had struck a nerve, and my heart skipped a beat. Damn it, a genuine fear finally began to creep in. I've already tampered with the surveillance cameras at the entrance. What those police are monitoring in real time isn't your apartment door, you know, as long as the person inside doesn't come out. Who would know that the same door leads to a different resident now? She was utterly insane. I began to struggle frantically. She flippantly patted my cheek, then shoved me down. She dragged me forward. I lived on the 18th floor, and beneath the balcony was a darkness so profound I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The night wind was chilling, sweeping over my clothes, which were soaked with cold sweat. It made me shiver. Having inhaled an overdose of ether, I couldn't muster an ounce of strength. An hour had passed. It seemed I couldn't escape. Just as despair settled in, a faint sound came from the door. In the darkness, I saw panic flash in Olivia's eyes. How is this possible? How could they have found out? Olivia snatched a nearby brick and brought it down hard on my hand, her eyes terrifying. Caleb, was it you? Tell me. How did you get the message out? Things had come to this point. I offered a faint smile and pointed to my chest. The tie clip, if you looked closely, there was a faint red light inside. It was almost imperceptible to the naked eye. A hidden camera. I heard the orderly footsteps of the SWAT team. Countless muzzles were aimed at Olivia. She used me as a shield in front of her. Her eyes were bloodshot, like a cornered beast. I sighed. Let go, Olivia, you can't escape now. Instead, she pressed her lips ambiguously close to my earlobe, chuckling softly as she spoke, word by word. Caleb, die with me, okay. With that, clutching my waist, she flipped over and leaped from the window. Unfortunately for her, she was instantly killed, blood splattering upon impact. But I landed on the inflatable mat that had been set up below, without even a scratch. The gruesome scene, with white brain matter mixed with blood gushing forth, was washed away by the heavy rain, disappearing without a trace. I was about to begin my new life. Saved 30 years of struggle, becoming a millionaire effortlessly. While this was great, I wouldn't wish such a nightmare upon anyone else. The sun was beautiful. It was good to be alive.